A woman named Julia Banks is attempting to persuade the police that she has been framed. Detective Pope is puzzled by her decision to reconnect with her ex-boyfriend, who had a history of abusive behavior towards her. Evidence in the form of photos on his phone and Facebook messages supports this claim. Nevertheless, Julia insists that she has not communicated with Michael Vargas. The detective finds her explanations lacking in credibility. Michael's body was discovered in Julia's home, making her the prime suspect.
The man is dead. Found in your home, with your face all over his phone.
The narrative then takes us back 6 months. Julia, the chief editor of a well-known online magazine, is celebrated by her colleagues with a toast. She aspires to live for herself while continuing to work remotely. Julia is uncertain if her choice was the right one. Her painful experience with Michael has made her more wary of men. However, her friend Ali believes that David is a good man who would never harm Julia. After bidding farewell to her colleagues, Julia moved in with her boyfriend, David Canover. The couple is planning to marry soon. Meanwhile, David's ex-wife Tessa is applying makeup, preparing to take their daughter Lily to her father for the weekend, as per their arrangement. Tessa appears friendly towards Julia. Lily is overjoyed to see her father, and after hugging her daughter, Tessa departs. Julia is making every effort to bond with her fiancé's daughter from his previous marriage. Later that night, Lily, unable to sleep, comes to their room. Tessa is also restless. The next morning, David leaves for work. Julia can't shake off thoughts of her ex-boyfriend, who once called her a nobody.
You're worthless.
David calls to inform her that he will be late. Julia, however, is fine with having dinner with Lily without him. While the girl plays, Julia prepares dinner. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. It's Tessa, checking in to see if everything is all right. Lily asks her mother to stay for dinner. Julia feels awkward but doesn't object. However, Tessa starts acting as if she owns the place. Moreover, she stays to help put Lily to bed. Naturally, Julia was not pleased about this situation. Tessa confessed that it was difficult for her to come to terms with their family's separation. Before departing, she wished Julia a good night. During the night, Julia was awakened by odd sounds. David had yet to return home. At one point, she spotted Michael outside the window and screamed, but it turned out to be merely her imagination. It was actually David. Julia recounted the day's events to her boyfriend. David reassured her that Tessa required time to adapt to the new circumstances. Julia was getting comfortable in David's home. She also familiarized herself with Lily's schedule to stay updated on all activities. Later, Julia reached out to Ali to voice her worries regarding the situation with David's ex-wife. However, her friend insisted that she shouldn't overreact. Upon seeing a stunning dress in a shop window, Julia instantly fell in love with it. However, her excitement was dampened when the saleswoman mentioned that Tessa frequently shopped there. The town is small, and everyone is acquainted with one another. Subsequently, Julia informed David that they needed to discuss their marriage plans with Tessa and Lily. David and Julia attended a children's celebration together, where Tessa was also present. After the performance, Tessa observed as Lily left with David and his new girlfriend, clearly enjoying herself. Witnessing this, Tessa became consumed with jealousy, believing that Julia intended to usurp her position. Although Tessa enjoyed horseback riding, even that sport couldn't alleviate her anger. In the evening, Julia participated in a party celebrating David's successful contract, as his new brewery was flourishing. Not long ago, he had abandoned his banking career to pursue his dream. Tessa was also in attendance, wearing the same dress Julia had coveted. Tessa took to the stage and delivered a speech, proclaiming her unwavering support for David and his aspirations, even stating that she had agreed to relocate for him. Almost none of the guests recognized her. Julia's mood darkened, but when David invited her to dance, she accepted. Tessa couldn't take her eyes off them. The thought of her ex-husband being happy with another woman was unbearable for her. Suddenly, she noticed that Julia had forgotten her phone. Later on, Julia discovered her phone was missing. Little did she know that Tessa had used the internet to find her date of birth in order to guess her password, and she was successful. Tessa browsed through all the photos on Julia's phone and stumbled upon a copy of the restraining order against Michael Vargas. This piqued Tessa's interest immediately. The following day, she visited her husband's workplace and questioned him about his certainty regarding Julia. David responded that he didn't require her advice or consent. When he informed her that he and Julia were planning to marry soon, Tessa thought it was a terrible decision. In her view, Julia lacked knowledge about raising children. As Tessa reminisced about their past life together, David suggested she should leave.
Tessa, goodbye.
After work, he returned Julia's phone, which he had found under the car seat. Julia received a call from an unknown number, but there was silence on the line. Tessa treated her daughter like a tyrant. In the afternoon, they were visited by Helen, Tessa's mother, who was critical of her daughter and everything she did. Tessa was displeased when her mother remarked that David's fiancé was quite nice. However, according to Helen, Tessa's daughter had neglected her appearance. Tessa was struggling at that moment. She wanted to seek employment, as she had an education, but Helen doubted her daughter's chances of success, claiming she couldn't even keep her family intact. Later, while looking at wedding photos, Tessa broke down in tears. In the evening, friends came over. Sarah, a friend of David's, warned Julia that Tessa was a very angry and jealous woman. Years ago, David had considered leaving her, but his plans changed when Tessa became pregnant. Throughout the evening, Julia received calls from an unknown number. In the meantime, Tessa set up a fake Facebook page pretending to be Julia. The following day, as Julia was preparing for a bath, an intruder broke into her home and took several items, including her engagement ring and David's watch. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. When Julia opened the door, she discovered a bouquet of flowers waiting for her. Just then, Tessa arrived, claiming she had seen a man leaving their yard. Julia, no longer able to hide her irritation, told Tessa not to come over without an invitation.
It was a delivery. Tessa, why are you here? At our house.
However, Tessa insisted that as long as her daughter was present, they would have to tolerate her company. Julia attempted to uncover the identity of the bouquet's sender, but the flower delivery service informed her that the order was anonymous. Julia formed a friendship with Lily, and they enjoyed each other's company immensely. Still, Julia was haunted by nightmares, convinced that Michael was lurking nearby. That night, she called Allie, expressing her belief that the calls and flowers were from Michael. Julia lacked the courage to discuss her feelings with David. Allie encouraged her to finally be honest with her fiancé. Meanwhile, Tessa was busy on Facebook, posing as Julia. She messaged Michael Vargas and received a prompt reply. They began exchanging messages, with Michael expressing that he missed her. Tessa then sent him a suggestive photo of Julia. In the midst of all this, she realized she couldn't find her ring anywhere. Later, Julia encountered Tessa on the street, and this time Tessa was exceptionally friendly. They both apologized for their earlier conversation. When Tessa proposed they have lunch together, Julia eagerly accepted. Tessa revealed that her marriage to David had ended due to her infidelity, explaining that David was always preoccupied with work, leaving her feeling isolated. Julia empathized with Tessa, but unlike David's ex-wife, she had a job. It appeared that the two women had a genuinely pleasant conversation. However, when Tessa began sharing spicy details about her marriage to David, Julia felt perplexed. David acts entirely differently around her. Tessa requested Julia to show her the ring that once belonged to David's grandmother. Julia fabricated a story, claiming it was being cleaned. That evening, Tessa rummaged through Julia's belongings, gearing up to execute her plan. While walking with Lily at the fair, Julia received another call from an unknown number. Distracted, she lost track of Lily. In a state of panic, she found David and informed him that Lily was missing. David hurried off to alert the guards. At one moment, Julia thought she spotted Michael again. She felt ill, yet she pressed on in her search for Lily. It turned out that Tessa had already located her daughter. She placed the blame squarely on Julia. Tessa also mentioned that she supposedly saw someone familiar to Julia approaching Lily. David demanded an explanation from his fiancé. He was also curious about the whereabouts of her ring. Julia confessed that it had gone missing. However, she had no clue about the acquaintance Tessa referred to. David was distressed because Tessa fears leaving Lily in their care. He worries that his ex-wife will prevent him from seeing their daughter. Julia spent a sleepless night. Tessa is attempting to teach her daughter how to ride a horse. Helen is disheartened that her granddaughter is struggling. The girl is frightened, but her mother insists she stay on the horse. Julia joined them, feeling quite self-assured this time. Despite Tessa's objections, she took Lily, as it was David's turn to spend time with their daughter. In the car, Julia explained to Lily that she understands what it feels like when someone you love treats you poorly. Julia's father was just like that. When Julia inquired about the man Lily had spoken to at the fair, the girl was confused and didn't know what she meant. Later that evening, David couldn't find the watch that Julia had gifted him. Subsequently, there was a dinner with David's primary investors. Julia couldn't shake thoughts of Tessa, who had claimed that she and David shared an intense passion. Julia decided to take action and led her fiancé to the restroom. Meanwhile, Tessa continued to send messages to Michael on Julia's behalf. The following day, Tessa insisted that her daughter apologize for her disobedience. She had cut Lily's hair, claiming that Julia was neglecting it. When Julia received an email from Michael, expressing that he missed her, she felt a wave of panic. Just then, the doorbell rang. Tessa arrived with her daughter, who was in tears. Upon discovering that Tessa had punished Lily by cutting her hair, Julia was taken aback and attempted to throw out her boyfriend's ex-wife. When Tessa heard David's voice, she began to scream, pretending that Julia had attacked her.
You're scaring me. Why are you hurting me? Stop it, Julia!
In a calculated move, Tessa pretended to trip and fell down the stairs, which made her story more believable.
Stay away from me! Tessa!
Initially, David sided with her. He took his ex-wife and daughter away. Witnessing this unfold, Julia realized that Tessa would stop at nothing to sabotage her life. Later that evening, after concealing a scratch with makeup, Tessa felt quite satisfied with herself. Julia explained the true events to David. He was left confused about what to believe. David was exhausted from the ongoing disputes and promised to have another conversation with his ex-wife, hoping she would finally leave them in peace. Ali booked a ticket for the next flight and came to support her friend. With the help of her hacker friend, they uncovered some details about Tessa. It turned out that she had been arrested at 16 for setting fire to her father's house after he left her mother for another woman. Fortunately, no one was injured, but Tessa continued to display obsessive and aggressive tendencies. Ali reconsidered her stance on her friend's engagement and suggested that Julia return home. However, Julia was determined to reveal the truth to David. When Ali departed, Julia heard the front door open. She assumed it was David coming back, but it was Michael. Julia attempted to reach her fiancé, but Michael struck her, claiming she had invited him herself. Julia quickly realized that Tessa was involved in this situation. She managed to hurt Michael and flee. Tessa had been lurking near the house the entire time. Once Julia departed, Tessa entered the house and informed Michael that he had failed his mission. Although Michael had never encountered her before, he understood that she was the one orchestrating everything. Tessa ended Michael's life. Julia recounted her version of the events to the police. She was convinced that Tessa had framed her by creating a fake Facebook account and communicating with Michael. However, the detective found this narrative hard to believe. At home, Tessa tidied herself up. Upon learning about the incident, David rushed to the police station. Julia expressed her regret to him for not informing him about Michael. She didn't want her beloved to perceive her as weak. David reassured the bride-to-be that everything would turn out fine. Detective Pope summoned him for questioning and presented him with printouts of Julia and Michael's conversations. It appeared she was planning to sell her ring and David's watch. He couldn't comprehend why she would need to do such a thing. Following the detective's suggestion, David was preparing to return home to his daughter. Upon discovering that her fiancé had left, Julia felt devastated. Tessa eliminated the evidence. The doorbell rang. It was David who wished to see Lily. Julia was released on her own recognizance during the investigation. Her phone was confiscated as evidence. She attempted to contact David using a landline, but he had left his smartphone in the car. Meanwhile, noticing Julia's ring on Tessa's finger, David realized who was truly behind all of this. At that moment, Julia rushed to her beloved, convinced that he was in danger. Tessa accused Julia of wanting to take her place, blaming her for everything. Recognizing that his ex-wife had lost her sanity, David planned to take their daughter away, but Tessa knocked him out. As she left the room briefly, she assured the unconscious David that she would take care of him. During this time, Julia stealthily entered the house. After confirming that David was alive, she went to find Lily and brought her to the car. Tessa tended to David's injuries and then restrained him, oblivious to Julia's watchful gaze. The terrified woman contemplated calling 911, but Tessa spotted her and lunged, knocking her down. Tessa began hurling insults at Julia, labeling her as worthless and useless. This only fueled Julia's resolve, prompting her to retaliate against Tessa. A fierce confrontation erupted between the two women. Ultimately, Julia managed to knock Tessa unconscious and rushed to assist David. However, just then, Tessa regained consciousness and attacked Julia once more. Julia pleaded with her to cease the violence before it was too late. Upon catching her reflection in the mirror, Tessa surprisingly halted. She willingly succumbed in front of Julia's eyes. Before her final breath, Tessa asked Julia to look after Lily. Overcome with emotion, Julia began to call out for David. When he regained his senses, he expressed his regret for not believing her. The police and ambulance soon arrived. Detective Pope recognized that Julia was indeed telling the truth. Upon seeing her father's fiancé, Lily embraced her warmly. 6 months later, David, Lily, and Julia were living together as a joyful family. By the way, the couple had recently tied the knot. Ali frequently visited them. Everything was going well until Helen knocked on the door, seeking to see her granddaughter.